The Clash of Wills Booger Exchange is about to come to an end, so let's quickly go over what items you can trade for these boogers before you forget about them like the various tickets and coins that I've apparently wasted. So first off, unfortunately, there are no longer any ways to get more booger drops, so if you don't have any at the moment, I guess feel free to go watch something else. But if you do have enough remaining, let's go through the options and see if we can figure out what's the best choice here. We've got several options: 5 units, 2 materia, a bunch of items you can really just pick up another time, and Riku. The best way to organize these is by utility and availability. Are these choices really any good, and is it possible for me to get these things later? Well, for the units, yes. The most obvious way to get them is through less than 0.1% drop rates in the summoning banner, as they likely won't be featured, but it's also possible that they might show up in a future Obnoxious Drop banner. As we can see from the P-themed one, there are several units that were once available in earlier Obnoxious Drop exchanges. Not that I plan to go through the trouble to show you a picture of available shop like that, so just trust me, I guess. The Materias, on the other hand, are much more uncommon. These aren't Super Trustmaster rewards, no. These are literally Materias the developers made up on the spot or were featured in some kind of undesirable and likely unprofitable banner in the past. As a result, there likely won't be another way to get these materia unless they choose to bring them back in a similar manner, but that hasn't really happened yet, so there's nothing to back that possibility up. The other items are much more readily available through other means, so obviously you only really consider these if you have any extra drops to spend. Personally, in terms of my current values, I'd order them like this, but you also have to remember I'm afraid to play with a lot of extra materials in the first place because I've been playing the game, so your values will likely differ. Speaking of you, given you'll likely be different from another player, I can't just assume you'll all have the same values, so I think the best way to go about this is to approach each unit or materia one at a time and organize their hierarchy later. When it comes to the units, I'll be keeping the Brave Shift or Super Lamp burst in mind, given that the Daily Fragment dungeon will apparently be a permanent thing sometime in August. Louise. She's got a lot of good support and a 90% Spirit Break, and if you have her intrinsic ability, her damage output skyrockets to the top 5 of standalone fire magic damage dealers. However, without support, 5th spot is what she'll amount to, and it's tough to say whether she'll receive any additional help in the future. Even though she's much better in Clash of Wills, she's still behind Roberta in the same vein, hopefully giving you an idea of her relative spot in these things. Oliveira. He has less support than Louise overall, but hey, maybe you'll still find it useful. But more importantly, with his intrinsic ability, his damage output is also significantly boosted all the way up to still behind Renoa, but that's still top 5. Put into practice, his intrinsic ability is a lot more helpful, given it has various other passes that don't make it into damage calculations because of game variables like species. And when you take into account his Clash of Wills modifiers, he sufficiently cements himself into the top 5 spot there. However, the top 5 is a truly ferocious playing field, with each unit far stronger than the last, and that's without taking external support into account. But Oliveira also has his own ability to potentially maintain most buffs on himself, which would be fantastic if we get a powerful Dark supporter or any more potent killers. Speaking of which, he is locked to Dark though, which isn't necessarily great. Raka. With Paladin Sylvie's release, her support abilities are heavily overshadowed. That is, with the one exception of her ability to reduce the cooldowns on cooldown abilities. I've used this a lot, whether it's to hit harder faster or to maintain buffs that normally won't last, but ultimately overall it remains a niche tool rather than a necessity. Her other abilities are still very nice, but you might already have someone who can cover those aspects. Riku. The Super Trustmaster reward Mugo is actually cheaper, you know. Celeste. A good magic tank and a strong supporter. However, if you really need a magic tank, I heavily recommend getting Chao from the seasonal banner because he's much better in that aspect. She's still a solid unit altogether though. Charlotte. A damage dealer with 3 elements, and strong magic defensive support despite not actually being a magic tank. However, her damage isn't that great, and the support isn't enough to stand out on its own. The Materias are 1/3 the cost of the units, and they're far more rare. There's only 2 though, and they are vastly different from each other, so I really think their importance will depend on your current inventory. Dragonfly Destroyer. A 70% offensive stat buff and a 50% double killer against both dragons and flies. 50% isn't a tremendous number, and dragon and insect killers aren't so uncommon either. The combination might come into play in the future, who knows, but there are very literally 12 species to mix and match, so there's a pretty decent chance of half the effect going to waste. Prideful Incarnate. An 80% magic stat buff and an 80% elemental resistance boost to water, earth, and light. This materia has much more potential than Dragonfly Destroyer, as 80% is much more significant when it comes to elemental resistance than 50% is to killers. It also helps that there are only 8 elements, which, if you know numbers, is 4 less than 12, and this materia covers 3 of them, which is better as a fraction. So personally, by my ranking, I'd recommend getting the materials due to their limited availability and my own personal inventory, but I also understand that some units can just look better. I already got 2 copies of the Materias, and for the units I went with Oliveira because he was very literally the only one I didn't have. However, if I didn't have a single one of these units, then I would go with Rocca because her cooldown reductions just aren't found elsewhere. Keep in mind that I do have other supporters, and if that weren't the case, I'd likely choose Luis. Oliveira might be the strongest unit here, but damage dealers are something that will still be released. That, and I don't really like being element locked now that I'm spoiled with strong, flexible damage dealers. I'll likely get Oliveira again with my remaining obnoxious drops just so I can get his Brave Shift, but I guess that's enough about me. Thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, leave a like and subscribe. Comment below who or what you'll get with your obnoxious drops. How many do you have left? Who do you want to get? What are you conflicted about? Why isn't Riser here? And why did my last 63 summon give me Aerith again? Why does Final Fantasy VII like me now?